Hi, welcome back. Today I'm going to be doing a book review and I'm so excited to be talking about the book that I'm going to be reviewing today. I spent the last week or so reading The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois by Honoré Fanonne Jeffers, and the entire time that I was reading this book, I was so engrossed by every element of the story. The plot, the characters, the writing, just everything about this was just captivating me. And I knew when I finished it that I absolutely wanted to do a full dedicated review. Not because I think I have anything like substantial to add to the conversation around this book, but because I need to absolutely sing this book's praises as much and as loud and as often as possible. This book is a massive multi-generational story that for the most part follows our main character, Ailey Pearl Garfield, who has spent her entire life trying to live up to the name that she was given. Ailey after the revered dancer Alvin Ailey, and Pearl after her great-grandmother, who is directly descended from slaves and whose ties to the land that her family lives on go very deep. Every summer, Ailey and her sisters spend some time in Georgia with her mother's family, and Ailey spends a lot of time learning about her ancestors and about the land that her family lives on. And sprinkled in throughout Ailey's story are also glimpses into the past. We get to read about Ailey's ancestors and about the impact that they made on the people around them, on the land itself, and how their choices shaped all subsequent generations all the way up to Ailey. We also get to read about a few important women in Ailey's life: her grandmother, her mother, and her older sister, Lydia. It's just this sweeping saga all about this family, specifically the women in this family, and the impact that they've had on the world, but also just like the larger implications of slavery in the United States and what it means to learn about where you come from and where your roots are. And it was just incredible. Before I really get into like the meat of the book, I obviously have to mention the book's length. Yes, this book is over 800 pages, and yes, it is a bit intimidating to look at, but don't let that deter you from picking this book up. It is absolutely one of the most readable books that I've ever read. I never really felt any tedium while I was reading this book, and the content isn't too dense. It is so readable. The language just flows. I believe that Honoré Fanonne Jeffers is originally a poet, and it absolutely comes through in the writing of this book. It is lyrical and descriptive, and it's just easy to fall into. If you've been intimidated to start it simply because of its length and the span and the scope of the story, don't let that deter you. Seriously, don't let it deter you. Don't be intimidated by this book. It is so readable, it's easy to get through, and I guarantee that when you get on the other side of it, you will not be disappointed with what you've read. Of course, that's not to say that there aren't hard topics discussed in this book. It's definitely a harder book to read content-wise. Definitely look into trigger warnings before going into this, because if you are at all triggered by anything, I'll list a few of the main trigger warnings down in the description. But if you have triggers when you're reading, I would definitely look into this book a little bit before you pick it up, because it's definitely difficult to read at times. There were moments in the story that I felt like it got to be too much for me personally, and so I had to take a step away. I had to put the book down, gather myself, and come back to it when I felt a little bit more prepared to tackle some of those harder topics, because the author definitely doesn't shy away from the difficult reality of many of the characters in this book. Okay, let's move on to like the craft of the book. This is one of the most well-crafted books I've ever read. You can tell that the author really took her time to get the facts of this book right. It is so well-researched. It really comes across in the way that the information is given that she spent a lot of time putting this book together and making sure that it was factually accurate and that she didn't misrepresent any part of the story. There's an incredible amount of attention paid to the details, and that is saying something considering this book spans over 200 years, following many different types of people, many different groups of people, and never once did it come across as inauthentic or filler. It all felt real, relevant, and necessary for the story to be whole. Like I mentioned earlier, the prose is so beautiful. The book is so well written. Everything kind of flows together in a really seamless way. The book opens with a long history of Ailey's people going back, like I said, over 200 years, and you sort of get a snapshot of their history in a short amount of time. You get a little bit of everybody's story, and it's enough to hook you and for you to want to keep reading. Like I mentioned, the ancestral part of the story was kind of sprinkled in throughout Ailey's sections, and I really enjoyed those sections because you got that little glimpse at the very beginning of the book, and then each of the subsequent like section breaks expounded on what we learned at the beginning of the book, and it made me that much more eager to continue to read and continue to learn. The hook at the beginning grabbed me so well that I just had to know how all these stories played out. Like I said earlier, this author is originally a poet, and that definitely comes across in the writing. Some of the lines in this book, some of the sections of this book just actually felt like poetry. I really couldn't get enough of the writing, and for, you know, a book this length to have grabbed my attention and held it for its entirety is just kind of a testament to the author. I never one time felt bored or like I wanted to put this book down. I just wanted to keep going. I had to know more about these people. I had to know how the story was going to turn out. I had to know. Every single character in this book is so dynamic and sort of leaps off the page. Because we spend the majority of the book following Ailey, she definitely does feel like the most well-rounded character in the book. We start the story when she's a little girl and end the story when she's like in her mid-30s, and so we really get to grow up with her, seeing her successes and failures, reading about all of the struggles that she has, but also the triumphs that she has, make her feel like a very real and relatable character. She was incredibly easy to root for, and I was really invested in her story. I was really engrossed in her story because of how imperfect she was, and she was so interesting to follow. By the end of the book, I kind of wanted to be her friend. Like, I felt like I knew her on a very deep level, and I loved that. But I also loved all the other characters in this book. Every single side character plays an important role in the story, and all of them feel like real, tangible characters and not just, you know, players in Ailey's life. Every person in this book sort of has a backstory. We get to learn a lot about almost every character. I mean, I can't think of a single character that we don't get to learn at least a little bit of something to make you care about who they are in the story outside of who they are in Ailey's life. Some of the major themes of the story are history, family, love, racial identity. It's about having the right to tell your story in the way that you want it to be told and not just relying on what we've always been told, what we've always been taught. The author really challenges a lot of the prejudices around the discussion of race and racial identity, and she doesn't shy away from hard topics. She really tells it like it is, and if it makes you a little bit uncomfortable to be confronted with this type of history, then I think the book is doing its job. I obviously can't begin to understand the depth of pain that Black people have experienced and continue to experience in America, but reading a book like this obviously allows me to understand on a much deeper level, and only good can come from people reading and experiencing stories about people that are different from them and that have had different experiences than them. And I think this book does a really good job of that. And it's why this book is just an absolute masterpiece, and why I would never hesitate to recommend it to anyone and everyone. I truly think this is a book that everybody can get something from. And despite its length, I do think that it's a book that more people need to read and just sit with for a while. I want to end this review by recommending a few books that I think are similar in some way to the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. If you read this book and loved it and want something else that is sort of in the same vein, then I would recommend any of the 3 books that I'm about to mention. And similarly, if you've read any of the 3 books that I'm about to mention and you want something similar, this is what I would recommend. So first up, I'm going to recommend a nonfiction book, and that is How the Word is Passed by Clint Smith. Obviously, in the love songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, a major theme is the history of slavery, not only in Ailey's family, but also in the South in general. And How the Word is Passed is about the history of slavery in America, and specifically tied to some landmarks and historical monuments that the history of have sort of been buried. Clint Smith highlights the importance of remembering a place's true history so that the people that lived and suffered and died there are not forgotten. And just like Honoré Fanon Jeffers, Clint Smith is also a poet, and so this is just basically poetry in nonfiction form. It's one of the most readable nonfiction books that I've ever read, and something that I think you should read no matter if you've read and loved this or not. It's a book that I think everybody should read. But if you're specifically looking for something that tackles a lot of the same themes as this book, then definitely check out How the Word Is Passed. Next up, I'm going to recommend The Vanishing Half by Britt Bennett. This follows two sisters who grew up in a town in the South that really values light-skinned Black people more. These sisters are fairly light-skinned, and as they grow older, one of the sisters ends up living as a white woman and the other one lives as a Black woman. This is also sort of a multi-generational story because we get to follow not only the two sisters, but also their family, their parents, and then eventually their daughters, and how the choices of the people in this town sort of shape the history and the future of all of these characters. In the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, many of the characters are white passing, and so they struggle with how light or dark their skin is. It's a major theme, obviously, in this book and in that one, kind of reconciling what they look like, who they are on the inside, with who they want the world to see them as. And I think they go hand in hand. My last recommendation is probably like the most obvious recommendation. If you hear the premise of this book, then this other book will probably immediately come to mind, and that is Homegoing by Ya Jossi. This again is about two half-sisters who live in Ghana, and because of the decisions that their families make, one of them eventually ends up married to like a high-class white man, and the other one ends up being sold into slavery and sent over to America. And each chapter in this book follows a subsequent generation and how the choices of the generations before them have shaped their present and their eventual future. It's obviously a much shorter book than this one. Like, it's like a third of the length, but I would say that makes this one no less impactful. It covers a lot of the same topics and themes in a much shorter amount of time, and it also has that like multi-generational family feel to it. I would say that these are probably like the most direct comparisons, and if you love one, you're probably going to love the other. That's definitely true in my case, and I can't imagine it wouldn't be true for you as well. So overall, I'm really glad that I finally got around to reading the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. It's one of the most impactful reading experience I've had in a long time. It's something that I know will stick with me for the rest of the year. And I'm even going to go one step further and recommend the audiobook. I listened to the audiobook and it was one of the best listening experiences I've ever had. Despite the fact that this audiobook is 30 hours long, I never felt its length. I never got bored while I was reading. I never wanted to skip ahead. If you are an audiobook person, or if audiobooks help you get through longer books, then definitely check out the audiobook because I think you won't be disappointed. So I think that's going to do it for this video. Let me know down in the comments if you have also read the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, and if so, do you have similar or different opinions to me? I'd really love to know. Also, let me know if this review has maybe influenced you to check this book out. I really hope so because I want more people to read it. I know it's pretty popular, and I'm sure there are already plenty of reviews out there convincing you to read it, but let mine be another voice added to the mix because I really do think that more people should read this book. Also, do you have any other recommendations for books that might be similar in some way to the Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois? I'm finding more and more that these long-spanning, multi-generational sagas are something that I really enjoy, and so I'm always on the hunt for more books like this. So if you have any recommendations, please leave them down in the comments. I would appreciate it. So that's going to do it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you again very soon. Bye!